Welcome to the Preliminary Cost Estimating Tool Training Series. In this segment, we'll be taking a look at the lighting section. Okay, so let's get started with the lighting section. If you want to know how we got to this point, you can look at our previous videos from general overview all the way up through guide rail and medium barrier. So let's add some lighting to this project. We'll switch our yes/no toggle to yes to include the lighting. And you'll see we've got highway lighting, pedestrian trailway lighting, and remove, relocate existing lighting. So let's start out with highway lighting. So we have our drop down here with our road names. Those come from up above in the pavement section. Those are input here and here. That drop down list will grow if you add more. But if you're not getting anything, make sure you check up here, make sure you have some roadways filled out. And that'll bring in the length of that roadway from the pavement sections. So NY 123, we have a length of 5,000 feet here. And you'll see that corresponds to the length that populates here when you select that road. You also have a manual length option to override the length that is being used for the lighting corridor. So you can go ahead and enter in any length you want here for lighting. Travel lane width is also automatically populated from the roadway. And this is used in the calculation to determine the luminaire spacing. Next we have luminaire placement, either one side of the road, both sides of the road, or in the median for divided roadways. For this example, let's pick both sides. And you'll see it comes up with a luminaire spacing of 250 feet. Let me just show you real quick. If we go back to one side, you'll notice the luminaire spacing goes to 100 feet to accommodate appropriate lighting levels for the roadway here. And then we have our plus and X buttons to add or remove segments. Let's take a look at Main Street. So you can see the difference in the spacing with a smaller travel lane width. You notice it's much greater spacing. Let's put this back to both sides and we'll leave the Main Street at one side. So it will automatically calculate the appropriate conduit and cabling for both sides versus one side. For both sides, it's going to assume you have cable running on both sides of the roadway, so it will multiply the length by 2 to come up with that. For one side, it's just going to use the length that is up here in your manual length. Then we can go down to pedestrian trailway lighting. This one is very straightforward as far as the inputs go. You can put in a description, say multi-use path, and let's say it is 2,500 feet long, and it's going to come up with all your items, and it's just going to assume a luminaire spacing of 75 feet, which is pretty typical for pedestrian lighting. Remove and relocate existing lighting. If you know a certain number of lights, you know, maybe you're widening the roadway, they're in pretty good shape, you just want to move them back, you know, 20 feet or so. You can use the Relocate lights, and you have to put in a length for the Relocate because you would have to, most of the time, replace the conduit and cable, so that's why you have to input a length there. Number of lights, just input, count them up and input that there. Remove existing lights, so if you're replacing the luminaires and the poles and everything, we'd select yes. And then we have a note here: enter only poles to be removed permanently. Down here in Relocate, lights being relocated entered here do not affect the lighting system calculated in the highway lighting section above. Just to remind you that this section up above for highway lighting is just for new lighting, not for, it doesn't include, or it's not overridden by any of the relocated lights here. So I'm just going to put 20 lights to be removed, just for an example here. And then down here, as with all the other sections, we have our user-defined non-itemized costs. We can put in any additional scope that might not be considered in our itemized calculations. Put that in there. Or maybe you did some calcs off to the side and you just want to account for something in the lighting section. You can put that in there too, and it will get added to the lighting total here. Let's take a look at our lighting worksheet here. So we have, first, we have luminaires, which can be found in this section right here. So you'll see, based on our inputs on the front, we get a lighting number for an LED highway luminaire and a quantity. And then we also have the pedestrian luminaires based on that spacing and the length we input. For poles, we have a single davit arm here. If we selected median lighting, we would have seen a quantity in the double davit arm here instead of the single. And then we have our davit arms themselves. So it'll come up with item number for a davit arm. Uses a 15-foot arm by default. And with any of these sections, of course, you can override your item number or your quantity if you do out calculations manually, or maybe you're using a different length arm in this case. Going back up to poles just for a second here, it assumes a 30-foot high pole by default, so you'd have to change that item number if you want something different. Moving on to foundation for your light poles. Foundation depth 6 feet is the default here. You can change that and it will update your item number here. You can also use a different item number if you wish. Quantity, you'll notice it's taking into account all of the highway luminaires, trailway luminaires as well. When it's coming up with this calculation. Transformer base, same thing. Overrides on the right. Conductors, we're assuming at the start here that it's going to be in conduit using 6-gauge wire and 2 circuits in each conduit. We'll come up with a item number for that, for the conductors, and a length. Then moving on to conduit, we're going to be assuming rigid plastic here. Again, you can change that material if you want. Conduit size 2 inches by default. Comes up with your item and quantity there. We have our overrides here. Going back up to conductors real quick. You can switch this to direct bury. You have a lot of options for conductor size and number of circuits if you wish to change any of those values there. Ground wire comes up with a quantity based on your conduit length. Pull boxes here just assumes you have a minimum of 2 and then 1 every 200 feet. You can change your item number if you want to use a different size pull box. You can override it over here, and a quantity as well. Then we have trench and culvert excavation. Include surface restoration, by default is yes. Has your item number, which you can override. You can override the quantity. This is also based on the calculated length of the conduit. Then we have our PowerPoints, so we have our control unit and the foundation for the control unit. This just assumes you have a control unit every 2,000 feet. You can override that number and quantity if you wish. Remove existing foundation, so this came from those 20 poles we said we were going to remove. And relocate lamppost. We didn't put any relocations in on the cover sheet, so that's 0, but if we had, this would populate. Another thing I want to note with that, I'm just going to hop back over and put in a few relocations here, just to show you some. I'll just say we're relocating 10 lights and 1,000 feet. And we'll go back to our lighting tab. So you'll see now we have those 10 relocate lampposts. And you'll see we now have additional conduit conductors for those poles and pull boxes as well. Moving on down, we have additional items here, user-defined items and quantities. You can put in any item number that you want associated with the lighting work. Just for an example here, I'll put in some 20302. For whatever reason we might have to excavate, I don't know, but just for an example, and you'll see that gets added to the lighting item list down here. Quantities are summed together, unit prices are populated, and we come up with an amount and our lighting itemized total here. And our lighting itemized total comes over here, gets summed together with the lump sum total for our lighting total. And that concludes the lighting section segment of the Preliminary Cost Estimating Tool training series. For additional preliminary cost estimating tool training, be sure to check out our other videos. Thanks for watching.